Story number 1. Stranger in the Christmas Night House. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that chilling Christmas Eve in 1973 Chicago etched into my mind like the persistent frost on my windowpane. My name is Laura Mitchell, and the night I first encountered the stranger in my home remains an indelible scar, a constant reminder of the thin veil between warmth and fear, and the shadows that linger long after the lights go out. Growing up in the heart of Chicago, my family's modest home on Maple Street was always the centerpiece of holiday gatherings. Every December, we adorned the living room with twinkling lights and a beautifully decorated Christmas tree, the scent of pine and cinnamon permeating the air. My parents, Robert and Margaret, were the pillars of our tight-knit community, known for their generosity and unwavering faith. As the youngest of 3 siblings, I cherished the traditions that bound us together, the laughter echoing through our home a testament to our love and unity. That year, 1973, Christmas preparations began earlier than usual. The anticipation of the season had me buzzing with excitement, attending parties and decorating our home with an almost obsessive fervor. On Christmas Eve, after a delightful evening spent with friends, I returned home feeling content and grateful. The night was crisp, the sky a deep indigo studded with stars, and a gentle snowfall began to blanket the city in white silence. As I entered the house, the warmth from the fireplace embraced me, and the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights cast dancing shadows on the walls. I set down my coat and settled into my favorite armchair, ready to enjoy a quiet night with my family. But as the hours passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It started subtly, knocking sounds that seemed too deliberate, objects slightly out of place. But I dismissed them as the house settling or perhaps the distant sounds of the city outside. Around midnight, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a light sleep, lulled by the rhythmic crackle of the fire and the soft hum of holiday music playing from the record player. It was then that the nightmare began. A faint noise jolted me awake, the sound of footsteps echoing through the silent house. My heart pounded as I strained to listen, trying to discern the source. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, moving from room to room with an unsettling purpose. Panic surged through me as I realized I was alone. No one else was supposed to be home at this hour. I grabbed a flashlight from the nightstand and crept out of my room, the beam cutting through the darkness as I navigated the familiar halls. The footsteps seemed to grow louder, more insistent, yet every room I entered was empty. Desperation clawed at my chest as I moved from one room to the next, each step bringing me closer to the inexplicable presence that haunted my home. Finally, I found myself in the living room, standing before the Christmas tree. The ornaments shimmered in the dim light, untouched and pristine. But something was wrong. The tree had been moved slightly, leaning unnaturally to one side. My breath caught in my throat as I noticed something even more disturbing. A message scrawled across the wall in what appeared to be dried blood. The words "Merry Christmas for the last time," dripping ominously from the plaster. Tears welled in my eyes as I backed away, the gravity of the situation sinking in. My mind raced, grappling with the horror of an intruder who had never been seen or heard. I fumbled for my phone, but there was no signal. An eerie silence enveloped the house, as if the very walls were holding their breath, summoning every ounce of courage. I dialed 911, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The operator's calm voice did little to ease my terror as I explained the situation, my voice breaking with fear. Moments later, the sound of sirens pierced the night, and police officers arrived swiftly, their presence a mix of authority and concern. They conducted a thorough search of the house, finding no signs of forced entry or the presence of another person. The only evidence was the chilling message on the wall, a sinister reminder of the night's events. The officers were baffled, their faces etched with uncertainty as they tried to make sense of the unexplained phenomenon. In the days that followed, the incident became the subject of hushed conversations and eerie speculation among our neighbors and friends. Some believed it was the work of a deranged individual, while others whispered about the restless spirit of a past victim seeking vengeance. The town buzzed with theories, but no definitive answers emerged, leaving us all to grapple with the terrifying mystery that had invaded our lives. As the years passed, the memory of that Christmas Eve never faded. Each holiday season brought a resurgence of fear, the shadows in our home seeming to grow longer and more oppressive. Robert and Margaret tried to maintain normalcy, but the atmosphere was forever altered. The once warm and inviting home now tainted by the haunting presence that had never fully departed. I sought solace in counseling, trying to unravel the psychological toll the incident had taken on me. The fear that had once been confined to that single night now permeated every aspect of my life. A constant undercurrent of anxiety that no amount of therapy could fully dispel. The unanswered questions gnawed at me, the lack of closure a wound that refused to heal. One particularly cold Christmas Eve, I found myself standing before the same Christmas tree, now aged and worn, the ornaments dulled by time. The house was silent, the memory of that night echoing in every corner. I reached out to touch the glass, the surface cool and smooth under my fingertips. It was then that I felt it, a cold breeze, despite the warmth of the room, and a familiar sense of dread washed over me. A shadow flickered in the corner of my eye, and I turned to see a figure standing behind the tree. He was dressed in a traditional Santa Claus suit, the red fabric stained and worn, his face obscured by a hood. His presence was cold and foreboding, a stark contrast to the jolly image we associate with the holiday. He stood silently, staring directly at me with eyes that seemed to pierce through my very soul. Frozen in fear, I watched as he began to move, the steps deliberate and unervingly slow. The ornaments shook on their branches, the lights flickering in response to his presence. "Why are you doing this?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. He didn't respond, his gaze unwavering as he continued to approach. The air grew colder, the room darkening as if the shadows themselves were closing in. Desperation clawed at me as I realized the true horror of the situation. The spirit of the man who had died wearing the Santa suit, his unfinished business anchoring him to the world of the living, summoning every ounce of strength. I turned and fled, the footsteps of the ghostly figure echoing behind me. I didn't stop until I reached the front door, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the lock. The figure remained at the window, his presence a haunting reminder of the night's terror. The police returned, finding no trace of the intruder once more, but the message on the wall remained, a constant testament to the haunting presence that had invaded our lives. The investigation yielded no answers, only more questions that deepened the mystery and the fear that had taken root in our home. Years turned into decades, and the story of that Christmas Eve became a local legend. A tale of terror whispered among the residents of Maple Street. Some believed the spirit had finally found peace. Others thought it still roamed our home, waiting for another chance to strike. But the truth remained elusive, the haunting presence a shadow that lingered in our memories and haunted our dreams. As I reflect on those dark nights, the lessons learned amidst the silent shadows and the lingering presence of the stranger behind the tree resonate deeply within me. Understanding that some encounters transcend our understanding, bridging the gap between the living and the departed with a mix of fear and compassion. I've come to embrace the complexities of the supernatural, and so, I warn others, cherish the moments you have with those you love, honor their memories, and be mindful of the mysteries that lie hidden in the places we hold dear. For in the heart of Chicago, amidst the silent echoes of tragedy and the lingering presence of restless spirits, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, but also a light that can guide us toward compassion and eternal peace. Story number 2. The Girl on the Way Home. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that frigid Christmas Eve in 1957 Pennsylvania lingering in my mind like the persistent echo of distant carols fading into the night. My name is Michael Donovan, and the night I encountered the ghostly girl on my way home remains an indelible scar, a constant reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the shadows that linger long after the lights go out. Growing up in the small town of Willow Creek, Pennsylvania, our family had always embraced the spirit of Christmas with fervor. My parents, Thomas and Eleanor, were pillars of our tight-knit community, known for their generosity and unwavering faith. My older brother, Jack, and I were the apples of their eyes, our childhood filled with joyous traditions and the comforting glow of the Christmas tree adorned with ornaments collected over generations. That year, 1957, Christmas Eve was no different, or so I thought. The air was crisp with winter's chill, and the scent of pine and cinnamon wafted through our home as relatives and friends gathered to celebrate. The living room was alive with the sounds of laughter, the crackling of the fireplace, and the soft strains of Silent Night playing from our old record player. We were preparing for the grand feast, the table laden with dishes that showcased my mother's culinary prowess. After a delightful evening spent with friends, I decided to drive home alone, eager to embrace the tranquility of our family's Christmas celebrations. The roads were slick with ice, and a snowstorm had begun to blanket the town in white silence. My car, a sturdy old Ford sedan, was my trusted companion on these cold winter nights, its heater battling against the biting cold outside. As I navigated the winding roads, the snowflakes danced in the headlights, creating an almost magical ambience. The radio played softly, a blend of holiday tunes and local news, providing a comforting backdrop to my solitary journey. My thoughts wandered to the joyous moments awaiting me at home, decorating the tree, exchanging gifts, and sharing stories by the fire. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, a young girl standing by the roadside, her thin frame shivering in the cold. She was dressed in a tattered Santa Claus suit, the red fabric worn and faded, her white beard singed at the edges. Her eyes, wide and pleading, met mine as she waved desperately for a ride. My heart ached at the sight of her, a lost soul seeking refuge on this frigid Christmas night. Without hesitation, I pulled over, my car coming to a slow stop against the snowy backdrop. The engine idled, providing a small oasis of warmth in the bitter cold. I rolled down the window, the sound of my voice breaking the stillness. "Are you all right, miss? Do you need a ride?" She stepped forward, her movements hesitant and almost ethereal, as if she were gliding rather than walking. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "I need to get home." I opened the door, gesturing for her to climb in. As she settled into the passenger seat, her presence was both comforting and unsettling. She didn't speak much, merely staring out the window with a vacant expression, her eyes distant and unfocused. I glanced at the dashboard clock. It was nearing midnight. "Where do you live?" I asked gently, trying to ease the tension that seemed to fill the car. She hesitated for a moment before responding, her voice quivering. "Elm Street." I nodded, adjusting the rearview mirror to keep an eye on her. "All right, Elm Street it is. Do you have a phone number or an address?" She shook her head slowly, her gaze never leaving the darkened road ahead. "I can't remember." A chill ran down my spine, an inexplicable sense of unease settling over me. It was as if her presence carried a weight beyond her physical form, a sorrow that clung to her like the winter's chill. I decided to proceed cautiously, driving slowly through the winding roads as we made our way toward Elm Street. The journey felt longer than usual, the storm intensifying as we ventured deeper into the night. The trees stood tall and imposing, their branches heavy with snow, casting long, ghostly shadows across the road. The snowstorm masked any familiar landmarks, making Elm Street seem like a distant, unreachable place. As we approached the edge of town, the roads grew narrower, the houses more sparsely spaced. Finally, I saw it, a modest home nestled among the snow-covered pines, its windows aglow with warm, inviting light. I parked the car in front of the house, the storm outside a relentless force against the sanctuary within. "Here we are," I said softly, turning to the girl. "Is this your home?" She nodded, her eyes finally meeting mine with a flicker of gratitude. "Thank you." I reached for my wallet, intending to confirm her identity, but when I looked back at the passenger seat, she was gone. Panic surged through me as I glanced around the empty car, her presence having vanished without a trace. My heart raced as I fumbled with the door handle, trying to open the door, but it wouldn't budge, locked from the outside. Desperation clawed at me as I realized the gravity of the situation. I called out to her, my voice cracking with fear, but there was no response. The car remained silent, the only sound the relentless storm outside. I pounded on the window, screaming for her to come back, but the reflection stared back at me empty-eyed and lifeless. Frantically, I tried to unlock the door, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Just as I began to lose hope, the door creaked open, and the girl stood before me, her expression now clearer, more defined. Her eyes bore into mine with a haunting sadness that sent shivers down my spine. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now carrying a weight of finality. "I can finally go home." Before I could respond, she faded into the night, the snow swirling around her like a spectral dance. I stood there, frozen, as the storm continued its relentless assault on the small town of Willow Creek. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the inexplicable events that had just transpired. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a serene blanket of snow and a sense of eerie calm. I returned home, my thoughts consumed by the ghostly encounter on that fateful Christmas Eve. When I arrived, the house was quiet, the familiar warmth now tinged with an unsettling stillness. I recounted the night's events to my parents, their faces etched with concern and disbelief. They listened intently, their expressions a mix of worry and skepticism. "It's probably just a lost child," my father suggested, though his eyes betrayed his uncertainty. Maybe she was confused or scared, but as days turned into weeks, the memory of the ghostly girl lingered, haunting my dreams and casting a shadow over the festive season. Determined to find answers, I delved into researching local records, uncovering a tragic story that matched the night's events. 10 years prior, on Christmas Eve of 1947, a young girl named Emily Jenkins had been involved in a fatal car accident near Elm Street. She had been on her way home from a holiday party when her car skidded on the icy roads, crashing into a tree. Despite the efforts of rescuers, Emily did not survive the ordeal. Her spirit, bound to the place of her untimely death, was said to roam the roads each Christmas Eve, seeking the way home she never could. The revelation struck me hard, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. The girl I had picked up was none other than Emily Jenkins, her spirit forever tied to the roads of Willow Creek. The sense of sorrow and longing I had felt in her presence was a testament to the tragedy that had befallen her, a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of the human spirit. In the years that followed, the legend of Emily Jenkins became a part of our town's folklore, a ghostly tale told with a mix of fear and reverence. Each Christmas Eve, drivers took extra precautions, wary of the spectral girl who wandered the roads, her presence a chilling reminder of the night's mysteries. I often find myself reflecting on that Christmas Eve, the night when the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest. The encounter with Emily was a harrowing experience, one that taught me about compassion, the weight of unresolved grief, and the enduring bonds that connect us beyond the realm of the living. But the memory of that night remains a haunting reminder of the thin line between honoring the past and succumbing to fear. I often find myself recounting the tale to friends and family, urging them to cherish the moments they have with their loved ones and to remember those who have passed on. For in the heart of Pennsylvania, amidst the silent echoes of tragedy and the lingering presence of restless spirits, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, but also a light that can guide us toward compassion and eternal peace. Story number 3. The Silent Stalker, a Christmas tree haunting. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that fateful Christmas Eve in 1983 Minnesota haunting my dreams like the persistent whisper of wind through barren pines. My name is David Mitchell, and the night our family first encountered the moving Christmas tree remains an indelible scar, a constant reminder of the thin veil between joy and terror, and the shadows that linger long after the lights go out. Growing up in the quiet town of Maplewood, Minnesota, our family home on Evergreen Lane was the heart of our holiday celebrations. My parents, John and Mary, were the pillars of our tight-knit community, known for their generosity and unwavering faith. My older sister, Emily, and I were the apples of their eyes, our childhood filled with joyous traditions and the comforting glow of the Christmas tree adorned with ornaments collected over generations. That year, 1983, Christmas preparations began earlier than usual. John had decided to purchase a larger tree, a grand fir that stood taller and fuller than any we'd had before. The excitement in our home was palpable as we awaited the arrival of the majestic tree, dreaming of the festive nights to come. On a crisp December afternoon, we ventured to the local tree farm, the air thick with the scent of pine and the promise of holiday cheer. The tree we chose was perfect, its branches robust and evenly spaced, the green needles fresh and vibrant. We brought it home, carefully setting it up in the living room, draping it with strings of colorful lights and hanging ornaments that told the story of our family's Christmases past. As night fell and we gathered around the tree, the room was filled with laughter and the soft strains of holiday music playing from Mary's old record player. The fireplace crackled, casting dancing shadows that mingled with the twinkling lights, creating a magical atmosphere that seemed untouched by the outside world. The first few nights were idyllic. Emily and I played with our new decorations, and John and Mary reveled in the warmth of family togetherness. But as Christmas approached, subtle changes began to unsettle our peaceful routine. It started with slight movements, branches shifting ever so slightly, ornaments tilting without explanation. First, we dismissed it as the house settling or the playful antics of our cat, Whiskers, but the movements grew more pronounced. One evening, as I was reaching for a star atop the tree, I noticed a shadow flicker across the room, momentarily obscuring the lights. Startled, I glanced around, only to see the tree standing still once more. Emily mentioned hearing faint whispers, voices that seemed to emanate from the tree itself, soft and unintelligible, barely audible over the crackling fire. Concern began to creep into our hearts. Mary suggested we install a camera to monitor the tree at night, a precautionary measure to catch any unusual activity. John agreed, though he tried to mask his unease with practical reassurances. We set up the camera, positioning it to capture every angle of the living room, hoping to uncover the source of our growing fears. That Christmas Eve, the night everything changed, we gathered for our annual family dinner, the tree glowing warmly in the center of the room. After our meal, as we settled into our usual spots, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The clock struck midnight, and the house seemed to hold its breath. As I reviewed the footage from our camera, a sense of dread settled over me. The recording showed the tree as it stood, silent and still. Then, in the dead of night, a vague black shadow began to form near the corner of the room. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, its presence cold and foreboding. The shadow reached out, subtly dragging the base of the tree away from the wall. I watched in horror as the tree seemed to tilt unnaturally, the ornaments swaying in an unseen breeze. The shadow persisted, moving around the tree, its form never fully defined, always shrouded in darkness. It didn't speak or make any noise, just an oppressive silence that seemed to emanate from its very being. As the footage continued, the shadow vanished as abruptly as it had appeared, leaving the tree back in its original position, untouched and unblemished. The next morning, the footage confirmed our worst fears. There were no signs of forced entry. No disturbances, only the unexplained movement captured on tape. We showed the recording to our neighbors, hoping for some rational explanation, but they were equally baffled. Whispers spread through Maplewood, tales of restless spirits and haunted homes, but nothing concrete to explain the sinister presence that had invaded our Christmas celebrations. In the days that followed, the shadows returned with increasing frequency. Every Christmas Eve, the tree would move, the black shadow lurking just out of sight, its intent malevolent and unrelenting. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, as if the tree itself was trying to communicate with us, its messages filled with sorrow and anger that chilled us to the bone. Desperate for answers, John delved into the history of our home, uncovering stories of previous owners who had also experienced unexplained phenomena during the holiday season. One story stood out: a family that had lost their son tragically on Christmas Eve, his spirit unable to find peace, forever tethered to the tree that had been his favorite. The realization hit us hard. We weren't alone in our suffering. The tree was a beacon for restless spirits, a conduit for the pain and loss that lingered in the air. Determined to break the cycle of fear, we sought the help of a local priest, Father Michael, known for his expertise in dealing with spiritual disturbances. Father Michael arrived at our home, his presence calm and reassuring. He conducted a series of prayers and blessings, attempting to cleanse our home of the dark energy that had taken hold. As he worked, the shadows intensified, the whispers turning into anguished cries that echoed through the house. The tree seemed to resist, its branches twisting as if in agony, the lights flickering in response to the spiritual battle raging within our home. In a final, desperate plea, Father Michael led us in a prayer of exorcism, his voice rising above the chaos as he invoked divine protection. The room was filled with an overwhelming sense of tension, the shadows recoiling from the light of our faith. Slowly, the oppressive presence began to lift, the whispers fading into silence as the tree stood still once more, no longer a vessel for sorrow and pain. The following Christmas Eves were different. The tree remained stationary, the shadows absent, the whispers silenced. Our home regained its warmth and joy, the horrors of the past now distant memories. We had confronted the darkness that had haunted us, freeing both our family and the spirits that had been trapped within the tree. Years have passed since that harrowing Christmas, and while the memory of those terrifying nights never truly fades, I find solace in knowing that we were able to overcome the shadows that once threatened to consume us. Our family legacy lives on, a testament to the strength of love and the enduring power of faith to dispel even the darkest of mysteries. But the memory of that night remains a haunting reminder of the thin line between honoring the past and succumbing to fear. I often find myself reflecting on the lessons learned amidst the silent shadows and the lingering presence of that once haunted tree, understanding that some encounters transcend our understanding, bridging the gap between the living and the departed with compassion and respect. And so, I warn others: cherish the moments you have with those you love, honor their memories, and be mindful of the mysteries that lie hidden in the places we hold dear. For in the heart of Minnesota, amidst the silent echoes of tragedy and the lingering presence of restless spirits, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, but also a light that can guide us toward compassion and eternal peace. Story number 4. The haunting gaze of Santa Claus. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that chilling Christmas Eve in 1998 Oklahoma lingering in my mind like the persistent echo of carolers fading into the night. My name is Laura Thompson, and the night our family first encountered the eerie Santa Claus remains an indelible scar, a constant reminder of the thin veil between joy and terror, and the shadows that linger long after the lights go out. Growing up in the small town of Pine Ridge, Oklahoma, Christmas was the highlight of the year. Our family home on Elm Street was always filled with warmth, laughter, and the enchanting glow of the Christmas tree adorned with ornaments collected over generations. My parents, Robert and Linda, were pillars of our tight-knit community, known for their generosity and unwavering faith. My older brother, Mike, and I were the apples of their eyes, our childhood filled with joyous traditions and the comforting presence of family. That year, 1998, Christmas Eve was no different, or so we thought. The air was crisp with winter's chill, and the scent of pine and cinnamon wafted through the house as relatives and friends gathered to celebrate. The living room was alive with the sounds of laughter, the crackling of the fireplace, and the soft strains of holiday music playing from my father's old stereo. We were preparing for the grand feast, the table laden with dishes that showcased my mother's culinary prowess. As midnight approached, the anticipation in the room grew. We gathered around the tree, exchanging gifts and sharing stories, our faces illuminated by the twinkling lights and the flickering flames of the fireplace. It was a scene of perfect harmony, a moment frozen in time, until it wasn't. It was around 12 o'clock when it happened. My younger sister, Emily, was the first to notice it. She was quietly humming a carol, her eyes fixed on the intricate decorations, when she suddenly froze. "Mom, Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. "There's someone outside." Before any of us could react, Emily let out a blood-curdling scream, her small frame trembling with fear. My parents rushed to her side, their expressions shifting from joy to concern. We all turned to look out the window, but there was no one there, only the silent night and a blanket of fresh snow covering the ground. Confusion swept over the room as we searched for any sign of an intruder. The windows were all securely locked, and there were no open doors. We called out, our voices echoing through the house. But the only response was the gentle hum of the Christmas music and the crackling of the fire. But then, as if conjured by our collective fear, a figure appeared in the frosty air outside our window. A man dressed in a traditional Santa Claus suit stood just beyond the glass, his red coat and white beard immaculate, his presence both jolly and unsettling. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, staring intently at our family through the window. My father, ever the protector, moved towards the door cautiously. "Who are you?" he called out, his voice steady despite the unease creeping into his eyes. The man didn't respond. Instead, he remained motionless, his gaze fixed on us with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. My mother reached out to open the door, her hand trembling slightly. As she swung it open, the man vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the cold night air and a lingering sense of dread. Puzzled and frightened, we stepped outside, searching the perimeter of our property for any sign of the mysterious visitor. But there was nothing, no footprints in the fresh snow, no trace of his presence. It was as if he had been nothing more than a ghostly apparition, leaving us bewildered and scared. The next morning, we learned from the local news that a man had died tragically the previous Christmas near our neighborhood. Harold Jenkins, a reclusive neighbor who had rarely been seen or heard from, had been found lifeless in the woods, dressed in a Santa Claus suit. The authorities ruled it a freak accident, but the circumstances were murky, leaving room for unsettling speculation. Rumors began to circulate that Harold's spirit still roamed the area each Christmas Eve, unable to find peace. Some said they had seen him wandering the snowy streets. Others claimed to hear his solitary laughter echoing through the night. But none had seen him at our doorstep, and the night we encountered him remained a haunting mystery. That Christmas Eve, our family struggled to shake off the eerie encounter. The festive cheer was overshadowed by an unshakable fear, a feeling that something malevolent had briefly touched our lives. We decided to keep the incident to ourselves, not wanting to spread fear or draw unwanted attention. Years passed, but the memory of that night never faded. Each Christmas Eve, the shadows seemed longer, the nights colder, and the feeling of being watched more intense. We fortified our home, installing additional locks and keeping a vigilant eye on our surroundings. Yet, the fear lingered, an invisible presence that whispered of unfinished business and restless spirits. One particularly cold Christmas Eve, as I sat by the fireplace reflecting on the past. A knock echoed through the house. My heart raced as I glanced around, remembering the night years ago. It's probably just the wind, my father reassured me, though his eyes betrayed his own fear. But the knock came again, persistent and insistent. My parents exchanged worried glances before my father cautiously approached the door. With a deep breath, he opened it, only to find no one standing there. The snow swirled in the air, and the night was silent once more. As he closed the door, a chilling realization settled over us. We were being watched. The fear that had once been confined to that first Christmas Eve had now seeped into every corner of our lives. A constant reminder of the thin line between safety and fear. In an attempt to find closure, we sought the help of a local medium, a woman named Margaret, who was known for her ability to communicate with restless spirits. Together, we held a séance on Christmas Eve, hoping to reach out to Harold's spirit and offer him peace. The room was filled with the scent of burning sage and the flickering light of candles, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. As we chanted prayers and asked for Harold's forgiveness, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. The candles flickered violently, and the shadows seemed to come alive, twisting and contorting in response to our pleas. Suddenly, the room was plunged into darkness as the power went out, and an oppressive silence filled the air. Then, amidst the darkness, a voice whispered my name, soft, sorrowful, and filled with anguish. "Help me?" It echoed through the room, sending shivers down my spine. The air grew thick with sorrow, and the presence of Harold's spirit became palpable, his sorrow binding him to our world. Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached out, trying to offer comfort to the lost soul before us. "We're sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "We didn't mean to scare you. We just wanted to help." The sorrow in his voice deepened, his spirit yearning for release. "I can't find peace. I'm trapped," the voice pleaded, echoing through the room like a mournful wail. Determined to free Harold from his torment, we continued our prayers, chanting words of forgiveness and offering our support. The room began to glow with a warm, comforting light, dispelling the darkness and lifting the oppressive weight that had settled over us. The presence of Harold's spirit softened, his sorrow transforming into gratitude. As the final words of our prayer were spoken, a serene calm filled the room, and the flickering candles steadied, casting a gentle glow. The shadow of Harold's spirit faded, replaced by a sense of peace that enveloped us all. We had succeeded in helping him find the closure he so desperately needed. From that Christmas Eve onward, the shadows in our home seemed less menacing, the nights less cold. The fear that had once consumed us was replaced by a newfound sense of peace and understanding. We had faced our fears, confronted the unknown, and emerged stronger as a family. Years have passed since that haunting Christmas Eve, and while the memory of Harold's sorrow never truly fades, I find solace in knowing that we were able to help a lost soul find peace. Our family legacy lives on, a testament to the strength of love and the enduring power of compassion to overcome even the darkest of mysteries. But the memory of that night remains a haunting reminder of the thin line between honoring the past and succumbing to fear. I often find myself reflecting on the lessons learned amidst the silent shadows and the lingering presence of Harold's spirit, understanding that some encounters transcend our understanding, bridging the gap between the living and the departed with compassion and respect. And so, I warn others, cherish the moments you have with those you love, honor their memories, and be mindful of the mysteries that lie hidden in the places we hold dear. For in the heart of Oklahoma, amidst the silent echoes of tragedy and the lingering presence of restless spirits, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, but also a light that can guide us toward compassion and eternal peace. Story number 5. Strange Lights in the Pines. A Christmas Haunting. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that fateful Christmas Eve in 2006 Montana lingering in my mind like the persistent whisper of the wind through the pines. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and the night my husband and I encountered the mysterious lights in the forest remains an indelible scar, a constant reminder of the thin veil between celebration and terror, and the shadows that linger long after the lights go out. Growing up in the bustling heart of Chicago, the idea of spending Christmas in a secluded cabin in Montana seemed like a dream come true. The prospect of escaping the city's relentless pace and immersing ourselves in the serene beauty of nature was enticing. My husband, Mark, and I had always cherished the tranquility that the countryside offered, and the small cabin we rented nestled on the outskirts of a vast, dense forest promised the perfect retreat. It was December 24th, 2006, a night when the world seemed to pause, holding its breath in anticipation of Christmas morning. The snow had fallen steadily throughout the week, blanketing the landscape in pristine white and silencing the usual sounds of wildlife. As we drove up the winding gravel path to the cabin, the trees stood tall and imposing, their branches heavy with snow, casting long, ghostly shadows in the moonlight. The cabin was quaint, with a rustic charm that immediately made us feel at home. Inside, the warmth from the fireplace embraced us, and the scent of pine mingled with the aroma of hot cocoa. We spent the afternoon decorating the Christmas tree, hanging ornaments that held sentimental value and stringing lights that twinkled like distant stars. Laughter filled the room as we reminisced about past holidays and made plans for the future. As night fell, we settled into our cozy living room, the soft glow of the fireplace dancing across our faces. Mark was engrossed in a book, while I sipped my cocoa, gazing out the window at the silent expanse of snow-covered trees. The world outside was still, save for the occasional rustle of branches swaying in the wind. Around midnight, as we were about to retire for the night, a sudden flicker of light caught my eye. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the light or perhaps a reflection from the snowy ground. But then I saw it again, an unusual, pulsating glow emanating from deep within the forest. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, a vibrant mix of colors that seemed to dance and shift in the darkness. "Mark," I whispered, nudging him gently, "do you see that?" He looked up from his book, his eyes following my gaze. "Yeah, I see it. That's strange. Maybe someone is camping out there." Concern flickered in his eyes. "I don't think so. It's too far to be anyone's campsite. And why would they come out in the middle of the night?" Curiosity overcame our initial apprehension. The light was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, pulling us towards it like moths to a flame. Without fully understanding why, we found ourselves drawn to the window, watching as the light moved closer, weaving between the trees with an eerie grace. As the minutes passed, the light seemed to take on a life of its own, darting and swirling through the forest. It was then that I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like someone knocking gently at the door. My heart raced as the sound grew louder, more insistent, echoing through the stillness of the night. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded, his expression tense. "Yeah, it's coming from outside." We exchanged uneasy glances, the festive spirit of the evening now overshadowed by a creeping sense of dread. The tapping continued, relentless and methodical, as if someone or something was trying to communicate with us. Against our better judgment, Mark grabbed a flashlight and the keys to the door. "I'm going to check it out," he said, trying to sound reassuring despite the fear evident in his voice. "Be careful," I urged, my instincts screaming to stay inside. He nodded and cautiously approached the front door, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. As he reached for the handle, the tapping abruptly stopped. The sudden silence was deafening, amplifying the tension that hung in the air. Mark opened the door slowly, peering out into the snow-covered landscape. There was no one there, only the thick forest stretching as far as the eye could see. The strange light was gone, leaving behind an unsettling void where it had once danced. He stepped outside, scanning the area with the flashlight, but found nothing out of the ordinary. "I don't see anyone," he reported, his voice shaky. It's like they vanished into thin air. Relief mingled with lingering fear as he closed the door and returned to the warmth of the cabin. We tried to brush off the incident, attributing it to our imagination or perhaps the play of lights and shadows. But the memory of that night would forever be etched in our minds. The following morning, we awoke to find footprints in the fresh snow leading from the edge of the forest to our front door. They were small, almost childlike, and seemed to halt abruptly just before reaching the threshold. No sign of the person who had left them, and no explanation for their sudden appearance. Mark and I were both unnerved by the discovery. The footprints matched no one we knew, and there was no evidence to suggest foul play. It was as if someone had been there one moment and vanished the next, leaving behind only a trail of unanswered questions. As days turned into weeks, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Strange noises echoed through the cabin at night, whispers that seemed to come from the walls and shadows that moved just beyond the corners of our vision. Objects would be moved, items misplaced, and the sense of an unseen presence grew stronger with each passing day. Desperate for answers, we reached out to our neighbors and local authorities, but no one had experienced anything similar. The incident remained a local mystery, the disappearance of the mysterious woman during Christmas becoming a topic of hushed conversations and eerie speculation. In the years that followed, the memory of that Christmas Eve never faded. It haunted my dreams and lingered in the corners of my mind, a constant reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. Mark and I eventually moved back to Chicago, but the shadows of that night in Montana continued to follow us, their presence a lingering echo of the mysteries that lie hidden in the darkness. But the memory of that night remains a haunting reminder of the thin line between honoring the past and succumbing to fear. I often find myself reflecting on the lessons learned amidst the silent shadows and the lingering presence of that secluded cabin, understanding that some encounters transcend our understanding, bridging the gap between the living and the departed with compassion and respect. And so, I warn others, cherish the moments you have with those you love, honor their memories, and be mindful of the mysteries that lie hidden in the places we hold dear. For in the heart of Montana, amidst the silent echoes of tragedy and the lingering presence of restless spirits, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, but also a light that can guide us toward compassion and eternal peace. Story number 6. Whispers Behind the Pines. The mysterious knock on Christmas night. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that fateful Christmas Eve in 1992 New York lingering in my mind like the persistent echo of carolers fading into the winter night. My name is Jonathan Thompson, and the night my family first encountered the haunting knocks on our door remains an indelible scar, a constant reminder of the thin veil between festivity and fear, and the shadows that linger long after the lights go out. Growing up in the heart of Brooklyn, our family home on Maple Street was the epitome of warmth and togetherness during the holidays. My parents, Robert and Linda, were the pillars of our tight-knit community, known for their generosity and unwavering faith. My older sister, Emily, and I were the apples of their eyes, our childhood filled with joyous traditions and the comforting glow of the Christmas tree adorned with ornaments collected over generations. That year, 1992, Christmas Eve was no different, or so we thought. The air was crisp with winter's chill, and the scent of pine and cinnamon wafted through the house as relatives and friends gathered to celebrate. The living room was alive with the sounds of laughter, the crackling of the fireplace, and the soft strains of holiday music playing from my father's antique record player. We were preparing for the grand feast, the table laden with dishes that showcased my mother's culinary prowess. As midnight approached, the anticipation in the room grew. We gathered around the tree, exchanging gifts and sharing stories, our faces illuminated by the twinkling lights and the flickering flames of the fireplace. It was a scene of perfect harmony, a moment frozen in time, until it wasn't. It was around 12 o'clock when the first knock echoed through the house, sharp and insistent. Startled, my younger sister, Sarah, looked up from her plate, her eyes wide with confusion. "Did anyone else hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. My father nodded, rising from his seat to investigate. "Probably just a neighbor," he reassured her, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. He walked to the front door, opened it cautiously, but no one was there, only the biting cold and a blanket of fresh snow covering the ground. He closed the door and returned to the table, offering a strained smile. "Nothing to worry about, Sarah. Let's get back to celebrating." But as the night wore on, the knocks persisted. 1, 2, 3 times, each knock more urgent than the last. Each time, my father would answer the door, finding nothing but the silent night and the swirling snowflakes. The family began to grow uneasy, the festive atmosphere tainted by the mysterious intrusions. By midnight, the knocks had become a relentless presence, echoing through the house like a ghostly refrain. My mother tried to maintain her composure, offering reassurances and trying to distract us with stories of Christmases past. But the tension in the room was palpable, the joyous celebrations overshadowed by the inexplicable disturbances. Unable to contain her fear any longer, Emily spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if someone is trying to come in? What do we do?" Before my father could respond, another knock shattered the silence, louder and more forceful than before. This time, when he answered the door, he found a trail of footprints in the fresh snow leading directly to our front porch. The footprints stopped abruptly, ending just shy of the doorstep, as if the person had vanished into thin air. Panic began to ripple through the family as we realized that something was terribly wrong. The police were called, and officers scoured the area, but there was no sign of an intruder or any evidence to suggest foul play. It was as if the person had dissolved into the night, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a lingering sense of dread. In the days that followed, the incident became the subject of hushed conversations and eerie speculation. Neighbors whispered about the tragic disappearance of our reclusive next-door neighbor, Mr. Harold Jenkins, who had vanished on Christmas Eve 5 years earlier. His body had been found days later near our property, a grim reminder of the darkness that sometimes lurked in the most unexpected places. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into researching local legends and the history of our neighborhood. I discovered that Mr. Jenkins had been a solitary man, rarely seen and even less heard. There were rumors of strange occurrences surrounding his disappearance, voices in the night, unexplained shadows, and sightings of a ghostly figure roaming the streets during the holiday season. Late one night, driven by a need for answers and fueled by the haunting memories of that Christmas Eve, I decided to return to the scene, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a notebook. I walked the snowy path to our front door, retracing the footsteps that had led to the mysterious knocks. As I stood on the porch, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it a chill that pierced through my bones. The footprints in the snow were still faint, their presence a stark contrast against the white landscape. I knelt down, examining the trail closely, and noticed something I had missed before, a faint imprint of a handprint, pressing into the snow beside the footprints. A shiver ran down my spine as I felt a presence, an unseen force watching me from the shadows. The air grew colder, the silence pressing in around me like a physical weight. I glanced around, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing to be seen, only the empty streets and the whispering pines. Suddenly, a soft voice echoed through the night, barely audible over the wind. "Help us," it murmured, sending chills down my spine. I turned towards the sound, but once again, there was nothing there, no figure, no sign of life, just the endless night and the haunting whispers that seemed to emanate from the very shadows themselves. Determined not to be consumed by fear, I returned home, my mind racing with thoughts of the past and the mysterious presence that still lingered in the night. The following Christmas Eves continued to bring the same eerie knocks and ghostly footprints, each year deepening the mystery and the fear that gripped our family. Years passed, but the memory of that first chilling night never faded. I often found myself reflecting on the lessons learned amidst the silent shadows and the lingering presence of a restless spirit seeking closure. Understanding that some encounters transcend our understanding. Bridging the gap between the living and the departed with compassion and respect. One particularly cold Christmas Eve, as I sat by the fireplace, the room aglow with the soft light of the tree, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The haunting presence that had once tormented our family seemed to recede. The shadows that had danced menacingly now gentle and benign. It was as if the spirit had finally found the closure it so desperately sought, allowing our family to embrace the true spirit of Christmas without fear. But the memory of that night remains a haunting reminder of the thin line between honoring the past and succumbing to fear. I often share our story with others, cautioning them to cherish the moments they have with those they love, honor their memories, and be mindful of the mysteries that lie hidden in the places we hold dear. For in the heart of New York, amidst the silent echoes of tragedy and the lingering presence of restless spirits, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, but also a light that can guide us toward compassion and eternal peace. Story number 7. Shadows Behind the Tree, a Christmas Haunting. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that chilling Christmas Eve in 1978 Virginia lingering in my mind like the persistent crackle of a dying fire. My name is Emily Thompson, and the night our family first encountered the shadowy figure behind the Christmas tree remains an indelible scar, a constant reminder of the thin veil between celebration and terror, and the whispers that echo long after the lights go out. Growing up in the small town of Ashford, Virginia, our family home was the heart of holiday gatherings. The Thompson household was always filled with warmth, laughter, and the enchanting glow of the Christmas tree adorned with ornaments collected over generations. My parents, Robert and Linda, were pillars of the community, known for their generosity and unwavering faith. My older brother, Michael, and I were the apples of their eyes, our childhood filled with joyous traditions and the comforting presence of family. That year, 1978, Christmas Eve was no different, or so we thought. The air was crisp with winter's chill, and the scent of pine and cinnamon wafted through the house as relatives and friends gathered to celebrate. The fireplace crackled, casting dancing shadows across the room, while soft carols played in the background, adding to the festive ambience. We were preparing for the grand feast, laughter echoing from the kitchen as my mother orchestrated the meal with practiced ease. As the evening progressed, we settled around the tree, exchanging gifts and sharing stories. Michael and I marveled at the twinkling lights and the beautifully wrapped presents beneath the branches. It was a scene of perfect harmony, a moment frozen in time, until it wasn't. It was around midnight when it happened. My younger sister, Sarah, was the first to notice it. She was quietly humming a carol, her eyes fixed on the intricate decorations, when she suddenly froze. "Mom, Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. "There's someone behind the tree." Before any of us could react, Sarah let out a blood-curdling scream, her small frame trembling with fear. My parents rushed to her side, their expressions shifting from joy to concern. We all turned to look, but there was no one there. The tree stood silent and still, its ornaments shimmering innocently under the soft glow of the lights. Confusion swept over the room as we searched for any sign of an intruder. The windows were all securely locked, and there were no open doors. We called out, our voices echoing through the house. But the only response was the gentle hum of the Christmas music and the crackling of the fire. Determined to quell Sarah's fear, my father reassured her. "You must have imagined it, sweetheart. There's no one here but us." But as we glanced back at the tree, unease settled over us. For a moment, in the flickering shadows, we thought we saw a faint outline of a man standing just behind the branches. His presence was barely noticeable, a silhouette blending seamlessly with the darkness. But the feeling of being watched was unmistakable. That night, sleep eluded us. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside, amplified our fears. My parents remained vigilant, checking every corner and crevice, but found nothing out of the ordinary. The mystery deepened the next morning when local news reported the tragic disappearance of our neighbor, Mr. Harold Jenkins, who had vanished without a trace a few years prior during the holiday season. His body was discovered weeks later near our property, a grim reminder of the darkness that sometimes lurks in the most unsuspecting places. As days turned into weeks, the memory of that Christmas Eve faded, but the unease lingered. It wasn't until the following year that the true horror began. Every Christmas Eve thereafter, a similar phenomenon occurred. Sarah would scream, claiming to see a shadowy figure behind the tree. Each time, we searched in vain, finding no trace of the apparition that haunted our celebrations. The town of Ashford began to whisper about the mysterious deaths that seemed to coincide with the holiday season. Some believed it was the restless spirit of Mr. Jenkins, unable to move on, seeking closure or revenge. Others thought it was a curse placed upon our family, a dark legacy that would never be broken. But no one could explain the recurring presence that loomed over our Christmases, turning joyous gatherings into nights of terror. In 1986, 8 years after that first haunting Christmas Eve, the phenomenon reached its peak. Our family was hosting another grand celebration, the house filled with the laughter of new guests and the warmth of shared memories. The tree stood tall, its lights shimmering like stars against the night. As midnight approached, the familiar tension began to build, an unspoken fear that the shadows would return. When Sarah let out her scream, the room fell silent. "Someone's behind the tree," she cried, her eyes wide with fear. We turned to look, hearts pounding. But once again, there was no one there. However, this time, something felt different. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, and the feeling of being watched intensified. My father, sensing the escalation, decided to take action. "We need to confront this," he said firmly. "We can't let fear control our lives." With determination, we gathered around the tree, holding hands, and began to pray together, seeking protection and peace. The room was filled with the sound of our unified voices, a desperate plea for the darkness to leave us alone. As we prayed, the shadows seemed to shift and swirl, responding to our collective will. The air crackled with energy, and a chilling presence filled the room. Suddenly, the figure behind the tree materialized, clearer than ever before. It was Mr. Jenkins, his face twisted in agony, his eyes hollow with sorrow. "Why?" he whispered, his voice echoing through the room. "Why can't you see me?" Tears welled up in my parents' eyes as they reached out to him, their hearts aching with empathy. "We're sorry," my mother whispered. "We didn't mean to cause you pain." But the spirit remained, trapped in a perpetual state of torment, unable to find peace. Realizing that words alone couldn't free him, we sought the help of a local medium, a woman named Margaret, who was known for her ability to communicate with restless spirits. Together, we returned to the house, determined to break the cycle of fear and release the soul that haunted our Christmases. Margaret led us through ancient rituals, chanting prayers and burning sacred herbs to cleanse the house of its dark energy. As we performed the rites, the air grew thick with tension, the shadows recoiling from the light we were bringing into the room. The presence of Mr. Jenkins became more pronounced, his sorrow palpable as he reached out to us, yearning for release. With each passing moment, the barrier between our world and his began to weaken. The shadows thinned, the cold dissipated, and the oppressive weight lifted from our hearts. Finally, with a final chant, the spirit of Mr. Jenkins found peace, his form dissolving into a burst of radiant light that filled the room with warmth and hope. As dawn broke over Ashford, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the remnants of the night's ordeal, casting a golden glow on our family home. The tree stood as a symbol of resilience and love, no longer haunted by the shadows of the past. We had faced our fears, confronted the darkness, and emerged stronger as a family. Years have passed since that harrowing Christmas Eve, and while the memory of those haunting shadows never truly fades, I find solace in knowing that we were able to confront and overcome the darkness that once threatened to consume us. The Thompson family legacy lives on, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the enduring power of love to overcome even the most terrifying mysteries. But the memory of that night remains a haunting reminder of the thin line between honoring the past and succumbing to fear. I often find myself reflecting on the lessons learned amidst the silent shadows and the lingering presence of our once haunted home, understanding that some encounters transcend our understanding, bridging the gap between the living and the departed with compassion and respect. And so, I warn others, cherish the moments you have with those you love, honor their memories, and be mindful of the mysteries that lie hidden in the places we hold dear. For in the heart of Virginia, amidst the silent echoes of tragedy and the lingering presence of restless spirits, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, but also a light that can guide us toward compassion and eternal peace.